Hey, young people, I want to let y'all know right now, we raising the retirement age from 65 to 70. So now you got to work from now until you 70 to afford a basic living. Bro, I'm not doing that shit.
Hey guys, I'm Hannah Cox with Base Politics, and you're watching my show, Hannah Explains It All. Every week, I'm addressing the internet's most pressing questions and helping people understand what's happening to them politically and economically. This week, we're talking Social Security and retirement. If you like this show, be sure to subscribe to my channel, leave me a comment, let me know your thoughts, hit the like button, and share it with somebody who might find it relevant. Over the past week, TikTok has somehow become familiar with Nikki Haley. Personally, I find it a little funny anytime the internet all of a sudden becomes familiar with a politician because, let's be honest, most Americans are not paying that much attention to what's going on politically. If you're not aware, Nikki Haley is the former governor of South Carolina. She's currently running for president as a Republican, and she's in second place behind Trump. Now, the clip that started surfacing of her is from a recent debate where she was asked what she would do about Social Security and made the mistake of answering honestly. Again, I don't know how TikTok got a hold of this. I don't think most young people watch presidential debates. My personal opinion is maybe the Trump team spliced it up and dropped it into TikTok and let it spread like wildfire. But either way, there has been weeping and gnashing of teeth over her response all over the platform. So let's watch this clip of what she actually said.
In 15 seconds, should voters in their 20s plan on having to work until they're 70?
They should plan on their retirement age being increased, yes. We're going to change it to reflect more of what life expectancy should be.
So to me, this was a pretty straightforward response because for reasons we're going to get into later in this episode, it's pretty much mandatory that they do raise the age for Social Security. It's just that most politicians don't want to tell you that. But before we get into it, let's watch a few more of my favorite reactions to her response.
Let me tell you something, okay? As a millennial who is 30 years old, y'all not gonna see me at the workforce at 70 years old. Y'all are not gonna see me clocking in every day, putting in the daily grind. I'm gonna tell you why. The system that we were made to believe was in service to us no longer exists. We were told to go to school, get good grades, get a college degree, you'll get a job. We did that and we ended up with student loan debt. Pandemic happens. The job market becomes trash. Not only do we have student debt, we can't afford to pay for where the we stay at. On top of that, inflation is a thing. And now they are sitting down having debates about raising the retirement age from 65 to 70. And another thing that they fail to forget, that back in the days you could work for a pension and be taken care of. They turned the pension away and made it into our own 401ks, okay? So if you're not putting money into your 401k, i.e. if you're not making enough money to even put money away in your 401k, you will be working until you're 70. I got about 10 more years left of me in the workforce. 10 more years. Talking to my brother about that a couple of weeks ago. I'm like, I think once I hit 40, I'm done working.
I keep seeing this clip of Nikki Haley where they ask her hey, you said you're going to raise the retirement age to 70? She's like, yeah, for anyone who's in their 20s. They're going to have to retire at 70. They can't retire at 67. And I'm like, first thing, my dude right here, you expect him to work to be 70. You expect him to work till he's 70? Or even some young people on this people younger than me. Am I included in that group, Nikki? I'm almost 40. I'm a few months away from 40. Am I included in that group? Second thing, Nikki, how is your only idea of, hey, Social Security isn't banking enough money to just pay less Social Security? How is that the idea when I just read a report that said we're going to see the first trillionaire in the world soon?
Hey, young people, I want to let y'all know right now, we raising the retirement age from 65 to 70. So now you got to work from now until you 70 to afford a basic living. Bro, I'm not doing that. What you gonna do, just not have a job? Hell yeah. Get y'all off myself. Y'all got me fucked up. Before I work my whole life away just to barely get by, I'll take myself up out this bitch. I'm already not making it. What more can I lose?
All right, where to begin? I think it's important first and foremost to say that in a democracy, the problem that most politicians face is most people want to be lied to. They really don't want to have to face the consequences of reality, and they will do anything to avoid having to look something in the eye. And the one problem I will say with capitalism is that it makes countries and individuals so wealthy that in large part, they do get to ignore some of the harsher realities of life. Nikki Haley came along and told the truth about Social Security, and she popped little holes in these delusional bubbles that people have been floating around in. And the reactions are why the vast majority of politicians, when asked about this situation, they just lie. They just flat out lie. They are kicking that can down the road and then pretending that they never even saw the can in the first place.
Governor DeSantis, finally to you, would you be open to raising the retirement age, and how would you keep Social Security sustainable?
My grandmother lived till 91, and Social Security was her sole source of income, and that's true for a lot of seniors throughout this country. So what I'd say to seniors in America, promise made, promise kept. I understand what you're going through with the rising prices, and you need that Social Security check. So we'll make sure to get that done.
You're paying the Social Security your whole life. You earned it. Now these guys want to take it away. Who in the hell do they think they are? Excuse my language.
Now, I do understand why Biden is especially attached to this issue because, let's be honest, if he weren't in office, he would be impacted by it because he should be retired. But because I'm not a politician, I don't need your votes, and I can shoot straight with you, which apparently somebody needs to do with the internet. I'm 36, so I am nowhere near retiring, but this is something that I actually do worry a lot more about than most of my peers I've noticed. And it blows my mind because the thought of being old and not having the money you need to sustain you terrifies me, and it really ought to terrify you too. Right now, if I lose my job today, I can go out and get another one. I can acquire more skills. I can do physical labor if I need to. As you age, those possibilities become lesser and lesser. You simply cannot do as much physical labor. The reality is many people will not want to hire you because there is a lot of ageism in this country. They won't think you're cut out for the job. And because as you age, it becomes more expensive to employ you due to healthcare costs and other things that you have to deal with as your body deteriorates. But while I've actually started planning for my retirement and saving consistently for probably at least over a decade at this point, I really have noticed that a lot of Americans think it's something they can just worry about down the road. And in large part, I think that they do this because they are depending on Social Security. Most people are aware that money comes out of their checks for Social Security, and probably most people are also aware that their employer has to pay into Social Security above what they pay them as a salary. But I don't think most people are aware of just how fragile the entire Social Security system actually is. I wanted to make sure we had specific numbers to discuss this, so I went digging, and here's what I have. Over the next 75 years, U.S. taxpayers face nearly $80 trillion in long-term unfunded obligations. 95% of those unfunded obligations are driven by only 2 federal programs, and they are Medicare and Social Security. What's an unfunded obligation, you might ask? I'm glad you did. It's basically money that the government has promised to pay. It's debt that they're going to owe, but they haven't actually raised the money to pay it yet, and they have to pay it whether they raise it or not. They're legally bound to do so. Now, in 2021, it was reported that Social Security can pay full benefits for just 13 more years. If the program's reserves do run dry, beneficiaries would face an immediate 20% cut to their checks coming after 2034. And as of August 2023, the average check is only $1,705 a month. I don't know about you, but I can't live on that much money to begin with. So even in the best of circumstances, which would be the government figures out a way to pay its unfunded liabilities and keep Social Security afloat, you're still kind of screwed if Social Security is your only plan for retirement. That guy claiming in the one TikTok that we could just seize all the money from Earth's first trillionaire once they arrive and cover the problem, he's delusional.
In the next 10 years, someone will own $1 trillion. Just so you guys know, that's $1 million. It's 1,000 billion is a trillion, and 1 billion is 1,000 million, and 1 million is 1,000,000. So someone will have $1 million, but you can't figure out how to get some of that money out of them? Like, we got billionaires running around. What are they doing?
$1 trillion is not going to cut it, buddy. Again, we're looking at $80 trillion in unfunded obligations already, not to mention what more might accrue. So no matter what politicians try to tell you or how they try to spin it, the reality is Congress has to do something, and they have to do something soon. Additionally, Congress really doesn't have that many options at its disposal when it comes to ways it can fix the problem. They can raise the age limit, which would simply reduce the amount of years people could be paid out of the pool of money, or they can raise taxes on you, which would also be very unpopular. Yes, all taxes are ultimately paid by you. This whole idea that you're going to tax the rich or just raise taxes on corporations and that won't get passed on to you is economically illiterate. You will pay the price either in higher taxes coming out of your pocket individually, in lower wages, or in higher prices for things and inflation. You're not going to beat the system. you're just going to make everybody equally worse off. So ultimately, whether or not they raise the age limit to 70 for Social Security or whether or not they raise taxes, you really should not be hanging your hat on Social Security. And this is one of many issues I have with government programs like this. It makes people dependent on the government, and then they stop doing their due diligence as an individual. And if you haven't noticed lately, the government is really, really bad at doing what it says it can do. It's super inefficient, and almost always you end up worse off when you are dependent on it. I know they probably aren't teaching this in school like many other things that they should be teaching and aren't, but Social Security was always meant to be a supplemental program for retirement. It seems most Americans are not getting that memo, though. According to a 2023 Fidelity report, Americans on average have saved only 78% of the amount they'll need in retirement, and they say 52% of U.S. households may not be able to pay for essential expenses in retirement. That's scary. You need to have saved about 8 to 10 times the amount of your annual salary in order to be covered in retirement. And that means people need to be putting a lot more into investments. Here's a newsflash, guys. Retirement is actually a pretty new concept. Period. And if you want to retire, you're going to have to do some work to make that a possibility. In fact, you should count yourself lucky enough to live in a country where you have the ability to work and save money so that you can retire. Because throughout most of human history, and even throughout much of the modern world today, it's simply not a luxury people get. People used to work through old age unless their families were able to take care of them and take some of that burden off of them because they had to do that to survive. Nobody was going to go hunt their food or put a house over their heads otherwise. So all these people complaining about maybe having to work to 70 years of age when the lifespan expectancy is around 77 years of age, they are just completely ignorant of what reality has been for most of humanity. The fact that you expect to retire and kick it, having a great time, living it up for a decade plus more of your life at the end of it is a luxury that has only been provided to you by capitalism in the first place. The way that we ended up with our current Social Security system is that as the industrial age came around, people started moving into cities. They were leaving farms where they had typically taken care of their elderly. They were getting a more centralized workforce. And thanks to all of the wealth and innovation that the industrial age brought about, people started living a lot longer. So after the Great Depression, we all of a sudden had a lot of people living in centralized locations. They were working in factories. They no longer had the ability to take care of their elderly. And we had a growing elderly population that was starting to live a lot longer. They were often impoverished due to the Great Depression. And so there was a huge push for the government to come in and do something to take care of people who had not planned for their own futures. Now, this was a super commie time period in American history. Like most of the terrible government programs and ideas that we live with today were passed back then under FDR, who was a monster and one of the worst things that ever happened to this country. That's also true of the Social Security Act, but it actually was a pretty limited approach compared to some of the more radical proposals that were floating around at the time. And it basically was supposed to be supplemental. It was never supposed to provide 100% of somebody's retirement. Instead, it was supposed to come alongside things like pensions and personal savings to make sure that there was some kind of a floor for people. They didn't end up on the streets when they were elderly if they had failed to take self-responsibility and plan for their future. But not only was Social Security meant to be supplemental, it was also never really meant to be long-term. Get ready for some crazy numbers. In 1935, when the Social Security Act was passed, there were only 7.8 million Americans over age 65. At the time, the average lifespan for men was 59.9 years, and for women, it was 63.9. So all in all, they were betting that the vast majority of people would actually not be able to take Social Security at all. And for those that were going to actually be able to live long enough to access it, it was still a pretty small segment of the population.
We get hurt on the job, we're asked out, we're out of luck because we're not even insured. Just because the life expectancy age has gone up, right, doesn't mean I should be expected to work up to that age. Like, that's crazy as shit. That's crazy as shit. It's crazy as shit. It's crazy as shit. Honestly, like, some days I wake up and I'm like, what the fuck are we doing?
Social Security was never meant to give you a cushy 20, 30-year retirement, yo walnuts. Nowadays, there are about 56 million people over age 65 in this country. 1 in 6 Americans are 65 or older. And the average lifespan is now 76 years of age. That's a lot more people that we all of a sudden have to pay Social Security to for a much longer time span.
If you really think about it, a retirement age of 65 doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. TikToker Kuru the Gemini recently sparked a conversation about this, and she found the whole thing absurd to the point that it left her cracking up. Because at first blush, 65 doesn't seem that old nowadays. We're all living longer and longer. That's a good 20 to 30 years of retirement, right? No. Because in 2022, the CDC found that life expectancy in the US had actually fallen to 76.1 years.
And by the way, for people saying that the life expectancy is going down as this TikTok did, yes, it decreased by 1 year during COVID because so many old people died because the government put old people with COVID in nursing homes and got them killed. Let's move on. You don't have to be great at math to understand that the math is not mathing here. You also don't have to be great at history to understand what a Ponzi scheme looks like.
Name the world's biggest scam. I'll go first. Social Security. If you're not familiar with how Social Security works, basically the contributions that you make go to pay out current beneficiaries. So people who have been paying their whole life, right? There's no money from when they paid it because it goes to pay out the person before them. Very similar to a Ponzi scheme.
He's exactly right. Social Security is a Ponzi scheme where people pay in at the bottom and move up. And then once they get to the top, those people start collecting the number of benefits that are being paid by the people at the bottom. But one of the biggest problems with Social Security right now is that pyramid scheme is no longer working. First and foremost, we have baby boomers who are starting to retire right now, and they are the largest generation out there.
According to Forbes and the Wall Street Journal, there's now 10,000 baby boomers every single day in the United States retiring.
That's a lot of baby boomers starting to retire all at once. Meanwhile, we aren't actually producing enough babies to make up for the people who are dying in America.
So, on average in America right now, couples have 1.94 kids on average. That's the average rate of birth.
And that's terrible because that's not replacing.
We're not replacing the amount of deaths that are happening in our country.
Our birth rate is declining. And on top of that, the current generations that are paying into the bottom of the pyramid scheme, which would be Gen Z and millennials, are not as great a number as the baby boomers. So the whole thing's falling apart. Some of these problems could be addressed if we were making up for the birth rate with things like immigration, making it easier for people to immigrate here, start working, paying taxes. Those kinds of numbers would help to fill the pool back up for things like Social Security. But it really seems like both sides are pretty against that solution.
The damn border should just be shut down. Nobody should be coming into America.
So all in all, you don't have the people left that you need to fund this thing. And that's before you even get into other factors that affect this, like inflation, rampant currency devaluation, and wage stagnation thanks to all of the government's regulation and taxes on private industry. My generation and those younger than me are playing like a giant game of Jenga. And the government just keeps removing all of these foundations of capitalism, and then they are shook when they pull out a piece and the whole tower comes down on their heads. Your beliefs are bankrupting you. The things that you support do not add up. And then when people are forced to look at the consequences of their own beliefs and of the policies that they've supported, they're mad about it, but they should be mad at themselves. While politicians hesitate to even suggest that we need to do anything to fix Social Security, like raising the age limit, the reality is all of us would be much better off without it in the first place. Personally, I would love the opportunity to opt out of Social Security. Even in the best case scenario, which would be Congress somehow figures out how to keep this thing funded so that I actually see some of the money I've paid into it back by the time I get to retire, I would still be losing money in this game. And that's because I'm not an idiot. And I could take the money that's currently being spent on Social Security for me and by me and place it into private investments that would make far more money in the long run.
On top of that, Sam Cedar compares 401ks versus Social Security, conveniently forgets to mention that people who are paying into their 401k are also paying for Social Security. That's 6.2% coming out of your paycheck. It's like investing for your future with a hand tied behind your back. And he calls this a success.
I haven't done the current math to figure out what these numbers would look like for inflation, but in 2005, then Vice President Dick Cheney gave a speech addressing just how much better off Americans would be if they were allowed to keep their money and invest it themselves. He said, young workers who elect personal accounts can expect to receive a far higher rate of return on their money than the current system could ever afford to pay them. For example, if a 25-year-old invested $1,000 per year over 40 years at Social Security's 2% rate of return, in 40 years, she would have over $61,000. But if she invested the money in the stock market, earning even its lowest historical rate of return, she would earn more than double that amount, $160,000. If the individual earned the average historical stock market rate of return, she would have more than $225,000, or nearly 4 times the amount to be expected from Social Security. So yeah, you should be mad about Social Security, but not at the politicians who are telling you the truth about it. You should be mad that the government has forced you into a system where it gets to steal your money, poorly invest it for you, and then can't even guarantee that you'll get to see your normal rate of return back. Again, this is my problem with the government coming in and running these kinds of programs. They're not charitable. Maybe they help the worst planners among us who don't take personal responsibility or plan for their future, but they do so at the expense of all of the rest of us that could be doing a lot better things with those dollars were we allowed to keep them. No matter what the retirement age is with Social Security, you need to be investing and saving yourself so that you have the amount you need to actually retire when you're ready. And at that point, it doesn't really matter when the Social Security age is. You can go ahead and retire based on your own savings and let that kick in as a supplemental income when you're ready. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode. Leave me a comment and let me know if you learned something new in this process, and I'll see you next week. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and be sure to hit the bell so you get notifications for new videos. If you like this video, be sure to watch others in my series, Hannah Explains It All, here. And don't forget to check out my weekly podcast with Brad Palumbo, the Base Politics podcast, here.